A bombshell report reveals that CNN's Chris Cuomo received preferential treatment for COVID testing because of his relationship to his governor brother, Andrew Cuomo. In this video, we're going to take a look at the specifics of the bombshell revelation, how CNN has all too conveniently ignored reporting on it, and how scandals like these are further destroying the credibility of the mainstream media precisely because of their intimate relationship with the Democratic Party. You're not going to want to miss this. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Steve here with you. Wonderful to be with you. As always, we're here to give you each and every single day conservative hope in the midst of these turbulent times, helping you to think better so you can feel better and provide for you a patriot path to freedom. So make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. Also, for you podcast fans, we've now reached over 2 million podcast downloads, so make sure to click on that link below and sign up for our various podcast platforms. We have you to thank for the fact that we are now one of the top 20 podcasts in the nation for political commentary. We've also got links to our Rumble and Parler channels down below as well. We'd love for you to subscribe to them. Before we dive in here, make sure to click on that link below and head on over to my special website for my Patriot Food Supply. As we saw with this whole pandemic insanity over the last year, we cannot wait for an emergency to happen before we respond to one, and absolutely no one makes preparing for an emergency more ridiculously easy and affordable than our good friends over at My Patriot Supply. Gang, they're simply the best. Their food kits last up to 25 years in storage. They include breakfast, lunches, and dinners, perhaps 2 breakfasts for you hobbits out there. And if you act now, you can save $50 off a full 4-week emergency food supply when you click on the link below to my special website. So don't wait. It's a limited time offer. I've got my food supply. Make sure you get yours. Click on that link below or go to preparewithsteve.com. Save $50 off your very own 4-week emergency food supply today. All right, let's dive right in here. Gang, the Cuomo brothers are collapsing. The Times-Union has reported that high-level members of the New York State Department of Health have admitted that they were directed by Governor Cuomo to conduct prioritized coronavirus testing on the Cuomo's relatives, as well as influential people with ties to Cuomo. Now, this is including, of course, his brother, Chris Cuomo, CNN, his mother, one of his sisters. It's being widely reported that as a part of the program, Chris Cuomo and his family were tested not by some registered nurse or health department assistant. No, they were all tested by top health department officials. And then the samples were sent to a state lab where they were processed immediately. And all of this while average New Yorkers were struggling to get tests in the early days of the pandemic. We've got to remember that when the coronavirus first broke out, labs were very limited in terms of the tests that they could run. It was only several hundred per day in a state with nearly 20 million residents. But for Cuomo's family, they got their results almost immediately, so it's no wonder that Breitbart's John Nolte entitled his response piece to all this, CNN's privileged Chris Cuomo stampeded your grandma to get VIP coronavirus tests. And that's precisely what happened, according to this report. Nolte said it so well. Here's what he wrote in response. Quote, CNN LOL's Chris Cuomo was not at any real risk. Nevertheless, top health officials still took time out of their precious days during a wartime situation to personally drive all the way out to the Hamptons to test Chris at home. Then state troopers raced his results to the lab. Then his test jumped to the front of the line. And then, and this is what I find most outrageous, the information his test results might have yielded to aid in stopping the virus and learning about the virus were hidden. All of these precious, scarce, and expensive resources that could have done some real good elsewhere were wasted on young and healthy and not at-risk man just because he's on TV and the governor's brother. Wow. And then Nolte goes on to point out what happened later when CNN's Chris Cuomo actually caught the coronavirus. You remember that? You remember the stage? You remember the stage resurrection when he came out of his basement after supposedly quarantining himself there for 2 weeks? I mean, it was the definition of cringeworthy. It was a staged resurrection. This really took the cake, right? Cuomo gets diagnosed with the coronavirus, and as Nolte points out, he totally milked it to boost his ratings as he was filmed claiming that he was sequestering himself in this basement for weeks. And then CNN staged his official emergence from the basement when the quarantine was over, with him reuniting with his family and the like. And you can hear him saying that this is his official re-entry from the basement. This is what I've been dreaming of, man, literally for weeks. His kids didn't quite know what he was talking about, but, now things are back to normal. Just one problem. It was all a lie. We now know that Cuomo broke his own self-isolation because it turned out they had had an altercation with a biker near his home in the East Hamptons on Easter Sunday. Cuomo himself ranted about it on his radio broadcast at one point. Tucker Carlson had the biker on his show, and it's just hilarious. I mean, again, embarrassingly hilarious how CNN thinks they can fool anyone like this anymore. Speaking of CNN, needless to say, CNN has completely ignored the bombshell revelation that one of their own got preferential treatment because he was the brother of the New York governor. As it turns out, Chris Cuomo's off this week, so he hasn't been around to address the scandal that he's now a central part of. But interestingly, none of his colleagues addressed the issue either. So obviously CNN has egg on their face, more egg than usual, I should say. But this ridiculous absurdity that's become CNN points to a much larger issue. I think this kind of scandal is just inevitable, given how close the mainstream Marxist media has become with the Democratic Party. I mean, the line between our reporters and our leftist liberal politicians, a line that's supposed to protect at least some semblance of objectivity in their coverage of our Democratic politicians, that line has been so severely blurred so as not to even remotely exist at this point. I don't know if you remember, it was about a year ago at this. Yeah, it was May of last year. Trump retweeted a photo of news personalities who were related to family members who are prominent Democrats. It's a highly revealing picture, and it helps to contextualize what's actually going on with the mainstream media in their relationship to the Democrats. It shows some obvious relations. Of course, it features Chris Cuomo, CNN, related to Governor Andrew Cuomo, Valerie Jarrett, who's a senior advisor to Obama. Is pictured next to her daughter, Laura Jarrett, who works for CNN. Jay Carney, who's press secretary for Obama. He's pictured next to his wife, Claire Shipman, who's a senior national correspondent for ABC's Good Morning America. You got the former national security advisor to Obama, Susan Rice. She's pictured next to her husband, Ian Cameron, who's an ABC News producer. It goes on and on and on. It's a very revealing picture. And what it does is it underscores the corruption of the mainstream media. And of course, Trump was absolutely right about the corruption of the mainstream media. He pointed out that much of this corruption is found in the fact that the mainstream media has effectively wedded together political partisanship and news coverage, right? I'll say that again because I think it's absolutely so essential for us to understand, at least in part, what's going on here, not just with the Cuomo scandals, but just with the mainstream media as a whole. The mainstream media is corrupt because they have wedded together their blatant political partisanship with what they consider to be news coverage. But it gets worse. It's not simply a matter of the line between the media and the Democratic Party getting totally and completely blurred, where the two, in effect, become one. Something even more sinister is afoot. But before we get into that, if you're looking for a hopeful alternative to all the fake news nonsense that's being spewed out there on a daily basis from these leftist likes of CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times, you're going to find no better antidote than what's in the pages of my book, The Return of Christendom. Now, you don't need to take my word for it, though you should. Just read through the reviews on Amazon. There's over 260 of them. And you'll see just how this book cuts through all the cynicism and despair that we so often feel living in this crazy globalist world. In page after page, I give you all the stats, all the data, all the indicators that show nothing less than a new conservative Christian majority emerging throughout the United States and, yes, throughout Europe as well. And it's already transforming the world map into a more nationalist, populist, and traditionalist world. If you click on that link below, we're offering it for a limited time at 50% off. That's right, you're going to get a 50% discount, so do not wait. It's a limited time offer. Click on that link, get your book at a super discount today, and arm yourself with the hopeful information you need to crush fake news once and for all. All right, let's take a snapshot from the 2016 election, okay? Among the top 100 largest newspapers in America, just two, the Las Vegas Review-Journal and the Florida Times-Union Jacksonville, just two endorsed Trump. And this fellow who writes the story, his name's Reed Wilson, he felt the need to point out that the Review Journal is owned by Sheldon Adelson, the casino magnate who spent millions trying to get Trump elected. It's a fascinating caveat to the endorsement because of how radically myopic it is, if not blatantly misleading. That caveat is misleading because it suggests that the other newspapers are somehow objective and rationally removed or disinterested in their endorsements, in this case with Clinton's. And that, my friends, is where the corruption of the mainstream media really lies. You see, it's not just in the superficial connection between so many in the media who are related to left-wing liberal Democrats who are their family members. It's not just that. It's the fact that the media has wedded their political partisanship with their news coverage while simultaneously claiming that they are objective, impartial journalists. That's the corruption. That's the unmitigated lie that's at the heart of the fake news media that Trump spent his entire presidency calling out. It's not simply that they're married, in this political partisanship with their news coverage. The problem is when you deliberately attempt to cloak that blatant partisanship with an overall denial of such partisanship. That's when you have nothing less than you have a deliberate deception, right, in professional news coverage. That's what President Trump called out, and that's what all independent content creators and citizen journalists and the whole of the alternative media are calling out on a daily basis. We together are calling out the overt and deceptive hypocrisy of the mainstream Marxist media, the vast majority of whom are in reality left-wing activists who use the cloak of objective journalism as a deliberate means of furthering their left-wing political agenda. The jig is up. The Cuomo brothers scandal is but the latest reason why the media's trustworthiness has absolutely imploded. Their days of exercising an information monopoly are over, and our days of independent content creation have just begun. Now, before you go, make sure to like this video, comment down below, subscribe to my channel, click on that link and check out some of our awesome merch. And you'll definitely want to check out my latest video I just uploaded. It's on how H.R. 1, ending the filibuster and gun control, crash and burn in the Senate. You're not going to want to miss it, so make sure to click on the link, and I will see you over there. God bless.